For RPDs, it doesn't matter what tooth number you select, as long as you select something on the arch you plan on working on. So I can choose a random tooth number on this upper arch, click removable, and it adds that to this entire jaw. You do also have an extra option where you can make one of the teeth as a pontic, and it will be part of the frame in the same material. You'd select that tooth and add anatomy, and just make sure it's set up as the pontic option. But for this case, I'm going to leave it just as the framework itself. For scan settings, I do have a physical model, but I don't have an opposing, so I'm going to turn that off and go straight into the scanning workflow. For scanning, it's not a whole lot different than prep cases, but there are some extra options that you'll want to take advantage of depending on what model scanner you have. For RPDs, it's usually helpful to have texture scanning on so that you can capture any drawings or marks that have been made on the model that give you a better idea of where everything needs to be placed. So I'm going to go into the settings here and make sure that scan texture is on. Just keep in mind that this will only be available if you have a D800 or higher scanner, or an E2 or higher scanner. And different models will have either black and white or color texture available. But with all of those options, it's just this one checkbox. As long as that's on, I'll continue next, and it will go through its scanning workflow. There is no preview scan for RPDs or other removable cases. It's just going to go straight into a detailed scan of the entire model, so it will take a little bit longer than most quadrants or prep cases. After the scan is complete, you can take a look around, and if you can't see the acquired texture, just make sure to toggle this little color wheel on or off to make that visible. One thing to note about all removable cases is that you generally don't want to trim the models or trim the scan data because of a way that it tries to close it. After we're finished at this step, what it's going to do is try and close the underside so it's no longer open like we see it here. And if I were to do some trimming, let's say I've trimmed away some of the stonework, just getting rid of some of those excess pieces. What the software is going to try to do sometimes is close this with a flat edge, which sometimes is going to cut straight through the palette because the palette is oftentimes deeper than these edges. So in order to avoid having a little slab of space filled into the palette, I'm just going to avoid the trimming altogether. And here we see our final result where the base is closed. Now that the scanning is complete, I'll continue forward into design. The first step of setting up this RPD is choosing our insertion direction and making sure that everywhere that we want to clasp is undercut, however much we need. To see this a little bit better, I am going to have to toggle back and forth between this texture scan and the normal scan, just so that I can see where the undercuts are and how undercut they are based on this color chart. So ideally, if possible, I'd want to have all of the clasps in the yellow regions, just barely undercut, but not so tight that it hurts to remove it. It's come up with an insertion direction automatically, just based on the shape of my scan. but I can modify this as needed by using these arrow keys. So I can move it left or right, and just keep in mind that these arrows will vary depending on where I'm looking from at the time. In addition, if you need to make more specific changes, you can adjust how much of a change happens with each click. So let's say I bump it down to 1 degree, so now it's making just a small adjustment with each click. The last thing to note is this blockout angle. So in addition to a parallel blockout, parallel to our insertion direction, it's just adding an extra 3 degrees all the way around. So we'll add an extra kind of fan out on either side. But 3 degrees is typical for that, so I'm going to leave that at the default and continue next. Now we can see the blockout that it's applied based on that insertion direction. And I'm going to move the slider a little bit further up so I can see it easier. Now that it's added the blockout, I need to take away some of those regions. So I'm going to use the minus tool and pull up my texture scan so I can take away wherever I need to add a class. So just use minus on those sections. And just like before, I'm not going to stick to one view. I'm going to keep toggling back and forth between texture and non-texture so I can see how undercut these different areas are. After I've reduced all the areas I plan on adding class, I am going to go back in with the smooth tool and just kind of smooth out these edges that I made, especially on areas where I see some of the orange undercuts, because that's usually a little bit tighter than I want, and by smoothing it should fill that in a little bit. After I've smoothed that out, I can continue next, and now we'll get into all of our major steps for our framework. The first of these is the retention grids. Most of these steps are going to work where you can add as many of these items as you want, and to add each one, you have to start by clicking one of the buttons on the left. So we only have our one option for the grids, but I can choose between a couple different grid patterns. I'm going to stick with the circular holes for right now. I'll click that button, and then let's pull up our texture scan again so I can follow along to that. Texture scanning isn't required, but it can be helpful for whoever's doing the designing. Once the line is closed, I can start to make changes just by moving any of the dots around. Or if you want to right-click on the line, you can get into a fast editing mode, which is similar to margin marking tools in other parts of the software, where you draw the line wherever you want, and it will adjust itself to match your drawing. Once I'm happy with that, I can just click the button again to add another grid. One thing to note as you draw these lines, we don't really have an undo button, and I can't edit any of the dots right now. So if I were to make a mistake, a misclick, I'm just going to ignore that until I've finished the line. Once I've made my way all the way around, I'll be able to correct that and fix those problems. So now that the line is closed, I can move around the dots, right-click to remove some of the extra dots, or right-click to get into the fast editing mode again, so I can just draw and fix that. After I've finished adjusting both of these lines, I'm not going to hit the next button, I'm going to hit the preview to get some extra options. So we can see the way it's applied the hole pattern that I chose. If I want to change that a little bit, I have to click on one of these dots without moving them. So I'm just going to quickly click on one of those. What that's done is it's pulled up this extra control point where I can move around where the pattern is being applied and rotate that pattern as needed. Another option you have, if you've clicked on that where the dot is visible, is if I decide I don't want to use the hole pattern, as long as this is visible, I can go ahead and choose a different pattern and preview again to see what that looks like. And if I want to change this one as well, I'll just simply again click on one of the dots and adjust the pattern as needed. Once I'm happy with my results, I'll hit next, and then continue on to the major connector step. So at this point and every step forward, I'll still be able to add as many different objects as I want, as long as in the end, every object is in some way connected to everything else.